Welcome to Outside Sales Talk, where we meet with industry experts to learn the strategies and tactics that make them successful. I'm your host, Steve Benson, and I've helped thousands of salespeople all over the world crush their quota. Today, I'll help you crush yours. Hey guys, welcome to Outside Sales Talk. This is the 5th episode, and today we're talking about how to drive career progression in outside sales. We've got Carson Heady on the call today to introduce him. Carson is a top performing outside sales leader, speaker, and management consultant. He's the author of The Birth of a Salesman series, which details the art of sales from interviewing through preparation, pitching, closing, and advancing your career in sales. He's worked at companies like AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile before joining Microsoft as a territory manager. In this role, he's overseeing partner relationships and leading strategic sales planning to grow revenue. It's important to note here, unlike a lot of the people that we have had and plan on having on this show, where who are generally thought leaders in sales and some of the heavy hitters who have written the best books on sales. Carson not only is one of those, but he is also a bag-carrying outside sales person. So he's actually practicing what he preaches today, and so I'm really excited for this one and to learn about what Carson can teach us in terms of how to drive your career progression in outside sales. Carson, welcome to the show.
Steve, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So, I guess just to jump right into it, Carson, what do you think is the most important thing to developing a successful career in outside sales?
That's a wonderful question. So I think when you're looking at specifically outside sales, there's a lot of perseverance that's required in that type of a role. But you've got to take every day at a time. You got to take every door pull or appointment as they come, and you can't let any of the baggage from a prior day or prior meeting carry on into the one that you're walking into. You've got to have your A game for each one of them. But anytime that you're discussing selling and that selling philosophy, I like to boil it down to people and process. You've got to be people-focused, people-oriented, customer-obsessed. You've got to make sure that you're always looking for how am I going to deliver value by any means necessary to the relationship at hand, even if it doesn't equate to money for you now or in the foreseeable future, because you never know where that investment of time and your time and your resources are going to pay off. So I have what I call a holy sales trinity. It's the customer, the company, and you want to make sure that all three benefit with every deal. Furthermore, prioritization is very key when you're developing a career in selling, because you've got to make sure that you check boxes on a daily basis. So we talked about people, but it's also about process and making sure that your process works. Now, your process is always going to evolve. You mentioned some of the companies that I worked for, and they've all gone through some very major changes over the last X number of years that I've been in the selling industry. So I've been through mergers and acquisitions. I've been through major organizational changes. And you may master your selling process today, and it may change drastically tomorrow. So you've got to also be able to be versatile and able to adapt. But again, your governing principle is adding value. And that's not only to your client, but it's also to your organization, and making sure that you're continuing to add value each day as you carry your bag and you deliver results. Finally, I like to talk about process a lot. And when you're talking process, that can be any number of things. I mean, that can be your daily prioritization, how you manage your day. That can be your pipeline management. That can be your process for follow-up. Keep in mind that selling is all about probability. It's just like gambling, except it's a lot better for you, and the house doesn't always win. But the thing of the matter is when you're selling and you're looking for a process, think about it from this vantage point. You're always looking at how can I enhance my odds of success. A marketing campaign that you may do, or cold calling, may have very minuscule odds of success, but realize, number one, that you're looking for ways to enhance your chance of success at each of these. So putting forth a better marketing message, the content is going to help you. And then also having a more effective message whenever you're cold calling is going to help you. But number two, realize that it's all strength in numbers, and you're also selling each step of the game. I'm not selling my product or service on call number one. I'm just trying to forge a relationship, trying to sell why that customer should talk to me. I may be trying to sell an appointment. So be very cognizant of where you are in the sales process. But I think those key pieces are fundamental to developing a successful career in outside sales.
Well, that's some fantastic advice, and I've got a million follow-up questions to this. If you were gonna give advice to, I don't know, let's just say a 30-year-old field salesperson, and she's working Arizona, New Mexico, and part of Southern California, and imagine that she's a dental sales rep, and she's talking to dentists. And she's early in her career. Maybe this is her first field sales job. She moved from another role within that company into field sales and took over a territory. What would be the top two pieces of advice that you would give her so that she could build her successful career in outside sales and actually do tangible things to implement those to implement that growth?
So anytime that you're coming into a new scenario, first off, congratulations to this hypothetical person for this this awesome new role in selling. You'll have the most fun of your life. Let's call
her Julie. Julie.
So Julie, first off, congratulations. I'm really excited for you in your new endeavor. But when you join in to a role like this, number one, it's paramount to understand what the expectations are. You've outlined a lot of us have an outlined territory. We may have existing clients. We may have white space. So it's important to understand what are the variables, right? What are the tangibles? Is there an established process? I've been really lucky in my career because I've had certain situations where I've walked in where there was an established book of business. And then I've had others where it was a brand new role and I could carve out what that was going to look like. Now, in this case, you're talking to dentists, so it's a very focused vertical, and you have the ability not only to research that vertical specifically, figure out what's going on in the area. I like to set up alerts within my emails so that I'm finding out, certain buzzwords, what's going on in this industry. Are there certain clients that are existing clients, or are there certain targets? Because I can set up alerts as well, or I can use platforms like LinkedIn. I got to give full disclosure. I work for Microsoft. We bought them. So I'm using them as an example here. But using platforms like that where you can follow certain organizations, certain verticals, you can join certain groups that are specific to those verticals where you can really brush up on the trade. The other piece I would understand is actually really twofold. What's going on in that selling arena? But then also, is anybody else doing what you do and doing it well? Because really, I'll say this, I've become a conglomeration of a lot of the people that I've interacted with over the years. You'll take really good practices from folks, and then there's others that, your personality isn't necessarily the same. So there are certain pieces of it that, bits and pieces that you'll take from everybody you come in contact with. But if you're able to almost develop a mentor-mentee type relationship with somebody else who's successful in that role, it's always good to have a cadence with them, understand what they're doing, maybe even tag along, be a part of those sessions. Because ultimately what you're looking to do, so long story short, is to build your own process. How are you going to go to market? How are you going to develop a rapport and a relationship with the current clients that you have? What are their problems? What are their projects? And how can you provide some type of offering that is going to plug some of the gaps that they may have? Or how can you be a part of the process as they look to move forward? You're talking about dentists, and clearly they have a process and they have certain ways of doing things. You provide a solution that ideally is going to make their lives easier, but you've got to make sure that they understand that, and they've got to see why, and they've got to understand the ROI. You've got to know who to really truly talk to at the practice. You're working with people that have very limited amounts of time to speak to you. So building that rapport and capitalizing on key opportunities to get in front of them is everything. You're going to get a lot of, because I've sold into a lot of verticals before, and I know talking to dentists, you're going to get a lot of, well, hey, he's here for this 30-minute window per day that you can actually get in front of him and speak to him. Why don't you just send him a packet of information? You're going to get a lot of that, so you need to be prepared for where it's working and where it's not, and you've got to make sure that everything that you send and say is going to be of the utmost probability of getting success to that next step, which ideally you want to get a meeting with this person. You want to get in front of them. Your organization probably has some established questions, materials that you can present from an ROI perspective to show why your service is better than the rest. But you're going to learn more from on the job, doing the job, than anything else you'll ever do. So no matter how well prepared you go in with your product, your service, what's going on in the industry, that sort of thing, you're going to learn a lot by doing things on the job. You're also going to learn by what you hear from clients, because you can regurgitate it. Client number 1 might be a little bit of a rocky road, but client number 1,000 that you get in front of, you can say, hey, in my experience, I've heard a lot of my clients in this industry have said that this is a problem. This is something that they're doing to address it. How do you feel about that? What are your thoughts on that? Because at the end of the day, it's the same as any fundamental in selling. People and process. You want to get to understand these people. You want to find ways to add value for these people. You need them to understand that you're here to add value for them and that you're here to really, you've got their best interests at heart. You want to take the problems and the projects that are top of mind for them and figure out how you can plug in and add value, how you can support them. Some of these folks, sometimes they have to do business with you because you're the only game in town, or they already are a client. And if they are doing business with you, that's great. How are we going to maintain and maybe grow that relationship? How are we going to make sure that they are getting the service and the attention and the TLC that they need and deserve? And then how are we going to grow that? A new product comes out, we're going to take that to our top clients, right? Because, they're already taking advantage of these offerings. They're probably going to see the value in these others. But again, there's a lot of thought process, but hopefully you can see from my description, it all comes down to people and process. It's setting the fundamentals of how you're going to go to market. All the while, be very cognizant that at each checkpoint, 30, 60, 90 days down the road, you're probably going to want to reassess, reevaluate, and pivot based on your learning up to that point. But I think the key piece of it is if you set the fundamentals in place and the foundation, and you follow those fundamentals, and you make tweaks to your process where you see fit. You also seek advice of, and counsel from other folks that might be peers or leadership based on their experience and their guidance. Be very open-minded to feedback. Continue to evolve your process, and you'll be all set.
All right. Well, I guess in a great follow-up to that is, say Julie does great for 2 years at the job, and she's posting some great sales numbers. She's under the impression that things are going pretty well with the career. Could you tell me a little bit about, for a field salesperson, when and how should you ask for a promotion, and how do you approach your boss and talk about career development?
It's a great question, because I think it's top of mind for a lot of us, right? I read that the average shelf life of us in any role is typically close to 2 years. A lot of us will spend 2 to 3 years in any type of role. And Steve, I'm glad you actually said that some time has passed for Julie in this role, because I've seen a lot of folks where, 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road, they're like, yep, I'm ready for the next job. There's two different things here, really. There's getting to the next level, and then there's truly being ready for the next level. If you really, truly master the sales process in your role, as opposed to just getting some good sales, then you've got the best chance of being successful in a role where you're going to be helping people who were possibly once your peers perfect their own process and craft their own process at that. As far as, asking for that promotion, there's, like anything that takes time, there are going to be steps and there's buildup. So you don't just walk in one day and say, hey, I feel like I'm ready for a promotion. When you enter into a relationship with anyone on your sales food chain, a client or your supervisor, it's important to sit down and understand what does the output of a successful meeting look like. So, I'm very, very transparent with people that, clients, with leadership, and making sure that they understand, look, this is what I'd like to do. Now, I'm fully cognizant that I need to master this role, and I want to do that in every way possible. I'm open to your guidance on what that looks like over these next 6 months, 2 years, whatever that might look like. So this is a conversation Julie has hopefully day one in her selling role, because likely when she entered into the role itself, there was some type of question around, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see your career going? So I think that conversation starts right out of the chute. Now, at the same time, even several months into some selling roles, I've still said, like, hey, I know where I want to get. I would love to be in a position where I'm comfortable with and qualified to coach people to do what I do and to do it well. But I know what I need to master. There are these different metrics that I'd like to, learn more about. There are, efficiencies and reports that I'd like to get more of a handle in managing. There's also more I'd like to do from a value add for our team from that perspective, because really being promoted and getting into a position of leadership is adding value beyond your own role. It's not just about being an individual contributor, because being a great seller doesn't mean you'll be a great leader. No matter how hard you try, it doesn't just automatically translate into being a great leader.
And so I've seen that a million times over the course of my career.
Exactly. And, there should be a career discussion at the onset of any relationship that you have with the leader. At that point, I think you enter into a verbal contract. They're going to give you the tools that you need to be successful. That's part of the contract. And in return, you're going to pledge to do these company initiatives and to support your territory, your team, your leader in the ways that you agree upon. Each time you meet with leadership, so there's probably checkpoints monthly, quarterly, annually, it's important to revisit that. Where have we been? Where are we? And where are we going? Am I headed in the right direction toward this promotion? Because if I've done the things that I've pledged to do, then I'm absolutely going to say at that point in time, Mr. and Mrs. Boss, I feel like based on the progression we've had here, the results, look at some of the wins that we've had in this territory, the processes that I've put in place. I mentored this peer. I managed to put together this presentation. You had me lead some team meetings. Be able to bullet point out the contributions that you've made and be able to tell that story. But at that point, you can say, I'm very interested in moving to the next level. Is there anything else that entails? Because really what that is you put a plan in place with your leadership to get you promoted. And if you've checked those boxes and you've done those things, that conversation becomes a lot easier than just walking in one day and saying, hey, I'd like a promotion and a raise, please. So I think the conversation happens throughout. But to your point, Steve, it's not something that is will happen without passage of time and contribution and investment in your role. And going beyond your own role, because you've got to add value outside of just that individual contribution. You've got to make them say, I want 20 Julies rather than just one Julie. And I believe Julie can create 20 different Julies.
Right. Well, great way to think about it. And how do you know when it's time to switch jobs when you're working in outside sales? How do you know when it's time to switch companies?
I think when there's no additional growth opportunity in your current role and or your current company, you've got a decision to make, right? Now, there's a lot of variables that will inform that decision, because you may be staying because of the paycheck and the benefits. They may just be too tough to let go of. So I may say, hey, I've got no more growth opportunity here, but I love the money I'm making, and that's what I want right now. Now, there's a lot of us, and kudos to you we want to continue to grow. We want to continue to grow our skill set and our acumen. And I'll say this, it's funny. I wrote a book 8 years ago, right? And how pompous was I to write a book that had anything to do about selling when I was in my 20s and I didn't have a clue what I was talking about? Because I look back at that, and I've learned so much about selling, and I think we continue to do so just with the advent of things like social selling and some of the applications that are available to use now that will enhance efficiency. like Badger Maps. So, I think the piece of it is looking at where's the growth and what are my priorities? Because if I'm looking to switch jobs, there's got to be a reason why. Sure, there's the old adage, the grass is always greener on the other side. Don't leave because you think that it looks more attractive. It's the same reason why, when we're in a relationship, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie High Fidelity, but it's based on the book by Nick Hornby that John Cusack's in the film. And really what it's all about is he's in a relationship, it's kind of going awry, and he runs into all these other females that he used to have relationships with. And all he sees at first is the attraction piece of it. But once you dig in, he doesn't have that whole experience and lived in that he had with his original relationship, because they know each other truly and have always been there for each other, and there's all that experience. So even though there's a lot of baggage and garbage there, it's that true, I know this person inside and out. With your job, it's the same way. You're going to look at this other job and be like, well, gosh, I wouldn't have to deal with all this administrative nonsense that I hate. Or, gosh, I wouldn't have all these horrible bureaucratic policies that I've got to deal with. Well, you know what? Maybe not, but you're going to have all new bureaucratic policies that you're going to have to deal with, and you're going to have all kinds of new administrative nonsense you're going to have to deal with. So, it may look attractive, but once you really dive in and get there, it's going to have issues too. And I think that's one of the biggest learnings that you have over the course of a career. I think we've all left roles at various times because we saw something that might be more attractive. And it may or may not pan out that way. If it did, that's fantastic. But if it didn't, maybe that will inform future decisions as well. So I think there's some risk involved anytime that you look at that. But if you can't grow any further, it might be time to look at a role that will offer you growth opportunity. And based on your relationship with your boss too, I mean, if you're looking internally at your own organization, based on your relationship with your boss, it might even be a conversation you have with them. Like, hey, maybe they agree with you that you've fulfilled your growth potential in that role, and they can help you, even if it's a lateral move or a promotion into a different segment of the organization. That's where, because they may have a buddy that works over in that other department. And that's how Julie goes from her previous role into a new sales role. So, I think it really depends on the variables at hand. But to best answer your question, it's time to switch jobs when there's no opportunity for growth and the other variables at stake there are not something that you really fear losing, like a paycheck or like benefits and things like that.
Yeah. I had an experience with that when I worked at Google, a large company, being able to switch from one role into another similar lateral role that allowed a lot more growth. And that was the right call for me. And I did that. I guess thinking externally, switching companies, could you give me an example of how you think one of the best ways to approach the job search are? Where to start, how do you make the initial contact? How do you think about which companies to go to?
We talked earlier about, really selling being a game of probability, and so is the job search. So you want to look at the activities that are going to give you the best probability of success. Think about it from a hiring manager's perspective, especially at another company where you may or may not have an in. They may see 1,000 resumes for a job. It's funny. I've got a friend of mine who, he's moved roles a few times. And I remember years back, he made a comment to me. He was like, God, I'd be perfect for this role. And I think he applied to like 1 or 2 jobs and he was looking for another job and he didn't get them. And he was really upset. And I think we've all been there, right? You see a job description, you're like, man, I would kill that job. I'd be perfect. I can't imagine not getting that job. And then we applied to it and we're really excited. And then a week or 2 later, we get this rejection notice, really nice and neat in an email. And it just lets us know we didn't get the job. They looked at somebody who was more qualified or whatever the case may be. So you got to think about the variables at hand. Of course, the HR team at that organization has to send you legally that very polite email. But what it really means is that HR manager probably had 1,000 different resumes that they were looking at. You had a 1 in 1,000 chance, if that. And as a hiring manager, I've hired hundreds of people in my career. It's a lot easier when somebody calls me and tells me, hey, you should look at this guy and here's why, especially if it's somebody that I know. So again, thinking about what's going to give you the best probability of success, number one, always start with your own network. Do you know somebody at that organization? If you're looking at a specific organization, or if you're not, and you just want to get a sales role, who does your network know that might be hiring or be able to recommend a type of a role? Because that's going to give you the best probability of success. I would much rather, as a hiring manager, I would much rather have somebody tell me, hey, you should take a look at this person, somebody that I know and trust, rather than have to look through 1,000 other resumes. And so that's why a lot of times those are the folks that get hired. Now, let's say you want to work for a certain company or get a certain type of role and you don't have an in. There are platforms that exist where you can go out and you can geo-target. I can look for, I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. I can look for St. Louis, or let's say I want to move. Let's say I want to move to Dallas, or I want to move to Los Angeles. I can geo-target for roles that are there for certain companies. I can also look for titles. And I think one thing that is, as sellers, sometimes we do, or whenever we're trying to get hired somewhere, we may look for somebody in HR, we may look for somebody in staffing. Look for the VP of sales. Look for the person that you would want to be working for, or that you would want to be working for in their hierarchy, and try to connect with them. Now, you have the capability on these platforms to send them nice personalized invitations to connect with you. So send them a nice little personalized invitation. Say something personal. Don't just send them a blind request. Say something personal like, hey, based on our mutual interests and your experience, I'd be honored to be a part of your network. They will accept 10 times as often as they would have if you just sent them a blind request.
And you're referring to LinkedIn, or are there other platforms that you're also talking about?
That's the one that I use. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Cool.
So, I don't use the name a lot just because, like I said, as a Microsoft employee, we purchased them. But there are other platforms that you can use, and I don't want to show favoritism on this, on this show. But let's say you're using that platform to connect with these folks. The last thing I would say is that our gut instinct a lot of times is to ask for a job, right? Hey, is anybody hiring? Is anybody doing this or that? Don't do that. Don't do that. Think about it. Really, what do I want here? I want to get in front of this person. I want to get to know this person. So if a VP of sales accepts my request, wait a couple of days, don't seem too opportunistic, and send them a nice little note. Thank you so much for accepting my request. Based on your experience, in this vertical, or, hey, I'm looking to parlay my skills as a sales rep into the dental industry. And I would love to get your feedback and thoughts on what challenges I may face. I'd love to get your advice. Could I take you to coffee? Could I take you to lunch? They're going to be a lot more apt to respond and say yes than if you say, can I have a job? And one thing that a lot of times I don't think we realize, but it's very true. The jobs that people are getting hired for, they may not even be posted anywhere yet. A lot of these jobs, when they get posted, they're already really filled for all practical purposes. They already know who they're going to put in the role. They had to open a requisition legally, and they had to interview a certain number of people internally and externally. That's just how it works. So know the playing field. Know what you're up against to give yourself the best chance at success. Meet these VPs of sales. Send them a nice note. Take them to coffee. And just get to know them. Ask for their advice. Because even if they don't have a job to hire you for today, you can be on their radar, and then the next time that they do, say, hey, John, I saw that you guys were hiring for this role. I'd love to know more about it. Now you know the guy. The other part is maybe he knows somebody in his organization that is hiring, and he can, when you're finished with your coffee, you say, hey, John, is there anybody else that I should maybe connect with? Can you think of anybody else that I should talk to in your organization based on my skill set? And he may recommend you. You're coming from a position of strength now, because you can say, hey, Mary, John told me that I should reach out to you and talk to you about some of the things going on in your organization. Would love to get some time. Well, rather than you just blindly reaching out to Mary, now you're coming from a position of strength. Think about it from a probability perspective. How can you enhance your chance of successes? Start with your own network. If you know somebody that can get you in, I mean, think about it. Every role that I've ever had in my career, and don't get me wrong, I feel like I've had some solid contributions to my organizations. I've won some awards, but every role that I've ever gotten, every new company that I've started with, it was because I had a connection somewhere that I made along the way. Every one.
Those warm introductions can be so important. They can be the difference between getting in front of someone and not getting in front of someone. I've seen that a million times. Well, next I'd like to enter the sales in 60 seconds section of the show, where we're going to ask you rapid fire several questions and just give 1 or 2 sentence or up to 60-second answers. So first question. What's a common mistake you see people make when it comes to advancing their career in outside sales?
thinking that they're ready for a promotion after a few months of solid performance. We talked about that earlier. I think anytime you believe that you're bigger than the role that you're in, that's a mistake. You signed a contract on opening day. I mean, you agree to do the role you're doing. You were excited about doing the role you're doing. So don't ever take your eye off the ball. Master that role. Don't stop realizing that you've got to take that contract, that you've got that contract in place every day, and just add value in every way you can. The biggest mistake you can make is taking your eye off the ball and realize that you're committed. You're forgetting that you're committed to that job.
All right. Do you have any daily habits or routines that have been key to your success in outside sales?
Yes. I think first thing in the morning and before all the madness hits, you've got to have some kind of me time. You've got to have some kind of quiet reflection time. Personally, I like to go to the gym early in the morning, get myself going. I come up with some of my best ideas while I'm there on the treadmill or whatever, and I just jot them down on my phone. And that's when I plan my day. I prioritize my day. I can listen to music and I can kind of free my mind, but I'm not being constantly and incessantly reached out to by different people within my line of work.
Sure.
And then as you're planning and prioritizing your day, sometimes I'll even send myself a calendar invite with my own priorities. And that way I make sure that I check them off one by one every single day.
I do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Actually.
I mean, it's the only way that I can ensure that I get it done. It's the same thing as like I'll have, my wife send me my to-do list, and I have that on my phone, and I make sure I check those things off. It's the same concept. And then lastly, pipeline management, going through the deals every day. I basically just look at all the deals every single day and I ask myself, how can I move this forward? Is there anything that I can do to impact this deal today? If there is, I do it. If there's not, I move on and I keep it going. And just having those things ingrained into your daily routine, because that and follow-up are the two most important things in selling, outside of maintaining the relationship. And, there's times where I will follow up in real time in the meeting just to make sure it furthers the cause and I lose no momentum.
And, along that same line, what's the most important characteristic or personality trait that's needed to become successful in outside sales?
Yeah, I would say it's funny because if you'd asked me that years ago, I would have said, it's personality and charisma. But as I've made it through the ranks in selling, I would say endurance. And I say that because there are so many things that you're going to encounter as a seller. I mean, your entire world as a seller may be upheaved tomorrow. And how are you going to react and respond to that? They're always going to need sellers. We're like guns for hire. I mean, so you've got to understand that you are constantly building toward the next role you're going to do, whether you know it or not, whether that role exists today or not, or even if you take your skills to another organization, because you're going to always use skills that you learned in previous roles, in current roles, in your next role. So I think the most important asset is endurance and understanding that, just because I had a deal go completely south, and I threw all of my energy into this deal and getting it done, and it went completely south, that I learned a ton of stuff on that deal that's going to inform me on my next deal.
Awesome answers. Well, Carson, I'm gonna summarize some of the main points here that we've seen for our listeners. So first of all, the two main aspects of success for outside salespeople are people and process. You have to be people-oriented and customer-focused, and you also have to master your selling process and be able to adapt it constantly as things change. Perseverance and great communication are also key to enhance your success in the field, and endurance is the most important characteristic. In outside sales, it's important to always stay on top of your selling, and you can join groups on LinkedIn, for example, and learn from mentors and other people in the industry. Another great tip from Carson is have a conversation about your career goals with your boss at the very beginning, about where you see yourself in 5 years, and put a plan in place on how you can get there and develop within the company. This makes asking for a promotion much easier because you've already agreed on what needs to happen for that to occur. It's time to switch companies when there are no more growth opportunities and when you're okay with giving up the benefits that come with it, like pay. Usually you want to spend about 2 years in one role before moving on and looking to advance your career. The best way to approach a job search is to look within your network first and get a warm intro. You can also connect with a VP of sales or whoever you want to work with at these companies that you're looking to get a job at with platforms like LinkedIn. The way you reach out is with a nice personal note, maybe asking for some feedback and advice about the role, and that'll increase your chance of success in finding the role that you're looking for. Carson, is there one last piece of advice you'd like to share with our listeners on how they can consistently and regularly grow and advance in their career?
Steve, you said it so much better than I ever could. I mean, that whole recap was spot on. I think the last thing I'd say is just be realistic about what you're endeavoring to do, and just kind of check yourself on a daily basis. Don't react. In my younger, dumber days, I mean, I reacted a lot of times to things that transpired. There's a line in one of my favorite movies, Cocktail, and it's never show surprise, never lose your cool. And I think if you can go into every single opportunity or call and not carry in the baggage of the prior ones, and the same thing with every day, bring your A game. You never know what's going to happen. It's going to enable you to seize each opportunity, and then add value in every relationship. Even if there's no money on the table for you right now, it's an investment into the future. That customer, even if they don't buy anything, might refer you to one that is your top client. And lastly, but not least, just endure. Just continue to plow through and add value, because that's going to make you the most valuable seller there is. There's a lot of folks that can come in, have some quick success, do well for 2, 3, 4 months, but the person that adds the most value is the one that can be the best for the longest and really truly be a student of the game, understand the fundamentals, and always look to add value for their organization and their clients.
Yeah, I'll tell you, endurance is a key takeaway for what's important for running a company too. As I've moved from outside sales into running a company, I've been amazed at how it's this is not a sprint. This is a marathon, that's for sure. So Carson, where can listeners read more about your work or reach out to you?
So I like to blog a lot. I post a lot on LinkedIn and Twitter. And I obviously have I actually have 3 books now. So I've got Birth of a Salesman and then 2 subsequent sequels that are available at Barnes & Noble and on Amazon.
Cool. Well, we will get all that stuff, all your blog and LinkedIn and Twitter and the links to the books, and put that all in the call notes here. Carson, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I feel like we've covered some really important things for field salespeople today.
Yeah, no, Steve, my absolute pleasure. Really appreciate it. I think very highly of you and what you do. So if you ever need to fill another spot on a future episode of Outside Sales Talk, I'd be happy to come back.
Fantastic. I really appreciate that. Have a great one, Carson.
Thanks a lot, Steve.